This is CFO IQ. Hi, I'm Andy Zizas, host of CFO IQ, publisher of CFO Intelligence Magazine, and chief strategist and CEO at Real Estate Strategies Corporation. Here on CFO IQ, we talk with forward-thinking CFOs from exciting enterprise and middle market companies, as well as some highly accomplished subject matter experts. Our goal is to bring you experience-based intelligence and the insights of highly accomplished CFOs and others to help you acquire, understand, and use knowledge, make you a more successful CFO, and to increase your CFO IQ. Welcome to CFO IQ. We're glad you're here. Hi, and welcome to CFO IQ. I'm your host, Andy Zizas. Unless you've been asleep for the last few weeks, you're likely quite aware that there's a trade war happening between the U.S. and a number of countries. If you're a CFO whose company could be affected by tariffs, either directly or indirectly, I'm sure you're spending a lot of time working to figure out the financial and other effects those tariffs will bring. In an effort to achieve parity, the U.S. has created tariffs on goods and services imported into this country from a number of other countries. Some of those tariffs are quite substantial and will affect companies large and small, and consumers as well. How will they affect your company, and how should your company prepare? What you'll need to know, what actions should you take now to preserve margins and protect profitability? Well, stick around and find out. On today's show, I'm joined by Travis F. and Dean Peterson from the National Accounting and Business Services firm, EisnerAmper's. I've asked Travis and Dean to join me today to share their insights on what companies should do in response to newly imposed tariffs on imported goods. Let me give you some background first on EisnerAmper and today's guest. EisnerAmper is one of the largest accounting and tax and business advisory firms in the U.S. Large enterprises, privately owned companies, and high net worth individuals turn to EisnerAmper for comprehensive audit, accounting, advisory, consulting, and tax services, as well as smart analytical insights. Our guest today, Travis Epp, is an audit partner in charge of EisnerAmper's manufacturing and distribution group. Travis has nearly 30 years of experience in public practice and private industry. Experience includes, not as I mentioned, public and private industry, and it helps him give value-added service to his clients related to operating issues, internal controls, profitability, and business planning. After spending nearly 10 years at a Big Four accounting firm, Travis assumed the role of senior financial officer at a family enterprise that controlled a number of public and private companies in a variety of industries. In his capacity, Travis was the certifying financial officer for 2 publicly traded companies. He also regularly presented to audit committees and executive boards. Travis's unique background provides him with an understanding of the audit process from the perspective of both the client and the customer. Let me also introduce you to Dean Peterson. Dean is the partner in charge of EisnerAmper's International Tax Services Group. With more than 20 years of experience, Dean delivers comprehensive tax consulting and compliance solutions to privately and publicly held companies across many industries, from startups to Fortune 100, and he does so worldwide. He advises clients on cross-border transactions, international tax planning, tax treaty matters, international taxation of financial services entities, IP migration, and tax-efficient structuring across multiple jurisdictions. Dean's one of the firm's Allied global liaisons and maintains a strong network of global contacts. Prior to joining Eisner Advisory Group, Dean was a principal at a top 10 accounting firm in its International Tax Services Group, where he worked with financial services technology and cryptocurrency companies on M&A, foreign tax credit optimization, and U.S. international tax compliance. His early experience includes having worked with large technology and insurance companies. Travis and Dean, I want to welcome you both to CFO IQ.
Thanks for inviting us, Andy. It's great to be here.
Andy, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to join you on CFO IQ to talk about this very, very interesting topic today.
Well, thanks so much, guys. This is a hot one, so why don't we jump into it? Tariffs are very, very funky for a lot of companies these days. So before we get started, why don't we talk about the differences between tariffs and international taxes?
Tariffs are separate from international taxation. Tariffs actually are administered by the Department of Homeland Security, whereas taxes are administered by the Department of Treasury through the IRS. So when we get questions about tariffs, there are often questions for the Department of Homeland Security rules, as well as the U.S. Department of Customs. They are the organization that administers and collects the tariffs and then remits them to the general fund of the government. The IRS does not handle tariffs, but when we're talking about tariffs, we are talking about something that goes into the cost of goods sold for our clients. So there are some, tax implications for tariffs. So tariffs can be complicated, and tariffs are all over the news these days. So it's a great time to be talking about.
Thanks, Dean. Travis, why don't you give us some details as to the real purpose of tariffs? Why are they around? What do they do? What do they accomplish?
Tariffs have a number of different rationale for imposing them. One, it is the opportunity for the government to regulate trade. Another impact of tariffs, it's a revenue generator that can be used to fund some of the government initiatives. As you know, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is hoped to be renewed this year and will require some funding. So maybe the tariffs will be a mechanism to do so. And then another rationale for tariffs is it's a way to protect domestic industry by just sort of making it more competitive for our U.S. manufacturers.
So I get that. But recently we experienced something called Liberation Day. What was Liberation Day about, and why was it so impactful?
As you said, Andy, Liberation Day was a day that will be remembered for a while. And I think one of the things that makes it so impactful is that this was really a policy decision of the government, and it was an intentional decision that had wide-ranging implications. At the time, I think some of us were not sure if this was a real strategy that the government was planning. That's a long-term strategy where they will keep this tariffs for a long, long time, or whether it was sort of a negotiating tactic to bring people to the table. And this whole, the immensity of the tariffs surprised a lot of people, or most of us, because it was more wide-spanning than anybody anticipated. And this created a tremendous amount of uncertainty in the market, and that continues. We don't know what the global response will be from each country, or even the different of our competitors within those other countries as well. So it's a very, very interesting time, and it will play out over a number of months as we see what really happens here.
Could I expand on that? Talk about supply chain.
I think, Andy, as you know, we live in a world where it's a global supply chain and it's very complicated. So a lot of companies are spending a vast amount of resources just to make sure and examining the supply chain that everything is the way they need it to be and want it to be so they can meet their competitive challenges. And as you know, you can't change your supply chain overnight. So even while a company is examining all parts from procurement through the manufacturing process, through distribution to the end, it's something that takes a while to change. You can't just reshore everything in one fall swoop. It takes years to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. if that is in fact an intended consequence of these tariffs. And it is something that management teams will have to put a lot of effort into.
Dean, let me ask you, what questions are you getting from clients relative to the whole tariff issue?
The only questions I'm getting these days are about tariffs from my clients, it seems. We're getting any types of questions right now, ranging from when is the dust going to settle? What's this going to look like for my business? Should I continue with my contract manufacturing operation overseas? So all these types of questions are, what people are thinking when they see large tariffs imposed on other countries' goods. And we have clients that function all over the world, whether it's in one country overseas, non-US, or whether it's in 50, they are asking about tariffs. They want to know, first of all, do tariffs only apply to goods, or do they also apply to services? At this point, the tariffs have not been applied to services. We anticipate that there will be some retaliatory tariffs lodged against countries who have digital service taxes that we feel or the government feels specifically target U.S. companies like Facebook, Google, Netflix, et cetera. So I anticipate that there will be some services tariffs down the road. We're not seeing that just yet. Right now, we're seeing questions from companies who are importing goods from other countries in order to run their businesses. And that right now is the biggest issue. Whether it's an auto manufacturer, I had a client that manufactures shopping carts ask about importing wheels from China, what that's going to look like. I've had clients ask whether they should establish an entity in a different country through which might have a lower tariff, through which to send their goods. And the questions are really all over the map because we have clients that have businesses that range, from a solo entrepreneur who's bringing some software as a service products into the country to large manufacturers that are, building station wagons in the U.S. They're wondering what the tariffs are going to look like for them. So one way that we're trying to help our clients is actually to develop something called the tariff tracker. And that tariff tracker is changing by the hour, it seems, because tariffs are changing, as the president determines a tariff should be imposed, he says it, and then we react to it. One thing we're also seeing right now, besides having to constantly update the tariff tracker, is we're seeing the markets becoming very volatile, as Travis noted earlier. One thing that our customers and our investors like to see is predictability. And that's the one thing that we are not seeing right now when we're talking about tariffs. So our clients, our investors are hoping for some predictability down the road.
So, Dean, let's stay with you for a moment with the international front, but also from an accounting perspective. How do altering tariffs, because we don't know where they're going to end up, and we don't know if they're short term or long term. How do they affect transfer pricing?
So we're going to have to really closely examine our clients' transfer pricing policies, and that starts with them talking about their supply chains, because transfer pricing is the purchase of goods from a related party in another country and determining how you price that. And there are a lot of rules involved with that, and a lot of economic rules and principles that go into determining what a transfer pricing policy looks like. So what I'm suggesting to clients now is they look at every aspect of their supply chain. They take a look at the components that they're buying, where they're buying them from, look at their intercompany agreements, which is specifically related to transfer pricing, to determine what those agreements look like. Is there any negotiation room in there? Is there any grace period related to these tariffs? Should there be grace periods related to these tariffs? Who's shipping the goods? When do you take title to those goods that are being shipped to you? Who's the importer of record? All these are very relevant questions for our clients when it comes to transfer pricing.
Okay, so Travis, let me come back to you for a minute, because earlier in our discussion, you talked a little bit about supply chain and the connection of tariffs to supply chain. What are the reactions that you're hearing from suppliers and customers? I mean, they've got to think about things like inventory costing, pricing decisions, ERP implications. What are they screaming at you about these days?
So, Andy, as we talk to our clients, what they're often doing is talking to both their suppliers and their customers to make sure that they're sort of aligned with what the expectations may be as a result of these sort of ever-changing tariffs. That is important to have that dialogue, to be on the same page again with both your suppliers and vendors. In regards to procurement, tariffs are definitely going to impact the inventory costing of companies, and that is a challenge that they will have to make sure that they have current pricing in their system in order to make sure that they know what decisions to make to properly price goods when they sell them to their customers. And even when they do change the pricing to their customers, there's sometimes those mundane details that people don't think of, whether it's going to be simply on an invoice. Do we increase the price, or do we add a separate line item for a tariff adjustment, sort of similar to some companies did when they had the increase in container costs from China years ago? Those are decisions to be made. And also that impacts sort of the ERP process of the company, just ERP process, to make sure that the company's systems are able to produce the output that is desired by the management teams.
Travis, you mentioned that you talked a little bit about how impactful tariffs are, not only from a financial perspective, but also on decision making. So I have to believe that tariffs are going to have an impact on the M&A market. What do you see?
I think, as we alluded to at the beginning, Andy, uncertainty is never a good thing for businesses. So I think that what we have seen or definitely heard is that some businesses have put a pause on to some potential acquisitions. Some companies that are already in the process of selling, I think we've heard they're continuing to go on with that process. However, we have heard that has been some hesitation for companies that were thinking about going into the sale process. Another impact on the tariffs that impacts whether or not M&A will proceed is what happens into the debt market and how will that impact the availability of financing for potential acquirers of businesses. As we've seen already, the stock market has been very volatile. And finally, I would say, and this is something that we have heard when we've been talking to M&A attorneys as well as investment bankers, there's definitely more diligence being or thought being put into the diligence of tariffs when a company is looking at the acquiring a business to make sure they have that under control.
Thanks, Travis. Ian, what are you seeing from an international perspective relative to tariffs and M&A?
So, as we've been harping on a little bit, predictability is what investors are looking for. And right now, we anticipate the M&A market to slow down a little bit until the dust settles related to the tariffs, because we're not certain, which businesses or which industries are going to attract investors at this point, because so many businesses are being affected by tariffs. What businesses are not being affected by tariffs? At the moment, services businesses are not being affected by tariffs the same way manufacturers and distribution companies are. But I anticipate that's going to change in the near future.
Well, what you just said makes a lot of sense. I recently met with the CFO of a manufacturing company whose company was contemplating an exit. And they recently met with investment bankers who said, you got a great company, now's not the time. And it had nothing to do with the company. It had everything to do with what's going on in the marketplace vis-a-vis tariffs. So you're spot on. Yeah, I mean, there's an awful lot of crazy stuff going on, and I'm not sure that we all understand exactly where this is going. But let me pose a final question to you both. How are you, in the context of everything we've discussed and the impact of tariffs and the weight on many companies that tariffs are creating, how are you guiding your clients today as to what they should be thinking about for the foreseeable future relative to tariffs? Sure,
Andy. First of all, the international side, we're continuing to tell our clients to, watch the news and pay attention to what's going on, like we are here at Eisner. We're paying attention to this. We're talking with customs attorneys and attorneys who specialize in tariffs as well to make sure that we understand what's going on for our clients. We're advising our clients, as usual, to think about how their supply chain works, think about, their intercompany agreements, and definitely keep an eye on all their advisors to see if anybody has any new information for them or if anyone can help them to navigate these tariffs.
Andy, we talk to clients on a daily basis, and the first thing I would say is no two clients are the same. Every client has a different situation. With the uncertainty, the pause in the impact of the Liberation Day tariffs, the thought that there's going to be negotiations on a country-by-country basis, those decisions will impact the tariffs across the board, and those will also impact the decisions of our clients. So we advise clients sort of to take their time before rushing to a decision because things could change. We know certain clients who have spent months and months looking at the process before Liberation Day came about, and then that sort of all pushed to the wayside with all these drastic changes. So just to advise clients, know your supply chain, keep always looking for alternatives, how you can improve it, and keep up those relationships with both your vendors and customers so that as you move forward, you're as much on the same page as possible to have that impact of your decisions be successful.
Travis, any particular recommendations to CFOs as to what they should be thinking about going forward?
Just like to point out that the tariffs are a huge policy decision that was announced by President Trump. He believes strongly that this is a way of changing the economics of the world that will better assist U.S. residents. It's a complex area, and management teams need to be directly involved in all of the decision making and the leadership throughout the entity to make sure that all the key members of the C-suite are involved in analyzing what's going on, how the tariffs change, how the negotiations are going, and what should be the reactions of the company that best suit each company to make sure that they continue to thrive in a very challenging world.
I think you're absolutely right. It will be very interesting to see what happens in the next 90 days. Well, Travis Epp and Dean Peterson, I want to thank you very much for joining us today on CFO IQ. This has been an enlightening conversation. I think we're all going to be watching and listening and learning with fingers crossed as to how the tariff issue works its way out through the entire world, in fact. But I want to thank you very much for spending time with us today and being here on CFO IQ.
Andy, it's our pleasure. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and CFO IQ. You do a great job in providing value to all of your constituents. Thank you again.
Thank you, Andy.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to learn more about Travis Epp and Dean Peterson or about EisnerAmper, visit CFOIQ.com and you'll be able to find a lot of great information. I want to thank Travis and Dean for joining me today. This is Andy Zizas. I hope you'll join us again here on CFOIQ.com. This has been a production of CFO IQ. If you have topic suggestions, would like to be considered for an interview on CFO IQ, or if you'd like us to consider publishing your story in CFO Intelligence magazine, contact our host, Andrew Zizas, at andrew.zezas@cfointel.com. Thanks for joining us. Watch us wherever you watch your favorite podcasts, or visit us at CFOIQ.com to view or listen to our next episode.